We've reached the sixth limb of our excursion into the Noble Eightfold Path, which is effort, as Vadanya said. And that's a bit fortuitous because we are doing this urban retreat. And as part of that urban retreat, we use a traditional teaching called the Five Forces. And the Five Forces are a recipe for succeeding at anything. And the first step in this recipe is to generate motivation, nurture some motivation. And of course, motivation and effort are just intimately related. They're like two sides of the same coin. More motivation, more effort. Less motivation, less effort. No motivation, no effort. And no effort, no progress. More motivation, more progress. So it makes sense, rather than sort of gritting our teeth and trying to squeeze out lots of effort, it makes sense to focus, to look at what gives rise to effort so that effort happens naturally. It makes sense to look at what motivates us rather than looking at maybe effort directly. And I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to come back to that later in the talk. But first of all, I'd like to just talk about, actually just unfold, if you like, the sort of traditional Pali canon type teaching on effort. And in this, effort is traditionally sort of described as the four efforts or the four exertions. And these are usually described as preventing, eradicating, developing, and maintaining. So preventing negative, unskillful mental states that have not yet arisen, stopping them arising. Eradicating, or I would prefer to think of just sort of letting die away, negative mental states which have arisen. Developing mental state, positive mental states which have not yet arisen, like cultivating metta, etc. And maintaining, or even I would suggest nurturing and growing positive mental states which have arisen. So it's a nice sort of neat little fourfold teaching. And a lot of that is about choosing what we identify with in our mind, and choosing where we put our attention and where we put our energy. So we put our energy and our attention on and our energy into positive states, and they develop. And we let negative states fade. We don't identify with them. We don't put energy into them. They'll arise. They're mental weather. They will arise. They will arise because of our past karma and conditioning. But we just don't do that. Maybe we say, I see you, Mara, as pointed out in my recent Thought for the Day video, and they sort of slink off into a corner. But obviously doing this, practicing these four right efforts, being on the lookout for, being very aware of our mental states, and I'll put energy into that, or I won't put energy into that. This requires quite a lot of moment-to-moment mindfulness. And it's usually something we practice in meditation. It's very associated with meditation. It is what we do in meditation. And we might think, well, that's all very well, but most of the time I'm not meditating. And often in the hurly-burly of everyday life, I simply don't have that sort of constant mindfulness to be watching my mental states in that way and discriminating between the positive and the negative, the skillful and the unskillful. Surely effort isn't just something that we do in meditation. Well, in a way, practicing the precepts is a big help in doing that. It's a big help in practicing the right efforts because it constantly reminds us when we're going off track. Generally, following the precepts will encourage positive mental states, and it will weaken negative mental states. So if we think of ourselves as Buddhists and we have the precepts in mind, we live by the precepts, there's a sort of general trend in our life towards skillful states, even when we're not being very mindful, actually. So there's a story about this in the Pali Canon about a guy called Mahanama. And Mahanama is a lay householder, so he has to earn a living and run a household, etc. And Mahanama goes to the Buddha and says, well, he's a bit worried. He says, I'm worried. I'm worried that often I'm not that mindful. Often my mindfulness slips. And I think, well, what would happen if I were to die while I was being unmindful? What would happen to me? And the Buddha says, well, Mahanama, if a tree is leaning towards the east and you cut its trunk, what happens to it? And Mahanama says, well, it falls to the east. And the Buddha says, well, actually, we're just like that. Somebody who's a Dharma practitioner, somebody who's going for refuge, leans towards skillful states. They lean towards liberation. They lean towards skillful states. And if they're cut by death, they will fall in that direction. Well, we don't have, hopefully we're not, thinking about having to, thinking about our death. It's just about our life. But hopefully we too, because of our going for refuge, we lean in the direction of positive states, even without seeming to make very much effort at all, or any effort at all. It just comes quite naturally if we're going for refuge. And actually, a lot of our effort that we might need to make in the spiritual life isn't about working directly on our mental states. It's not about changing our mental states directly, or working on our mental states. A lot of our effort is about setting up the conditions, or putting ourselves in the conditions that give rise to positive mental states. So we make the effort to get up and meditate, or we make the effort to go on retreat, or we make the effort to turn up to Sangha night. And these things then tend to give rise to positive mental states and to weaken unskillful states. But what we're doing is not focusing on the mental states, we're focusing on the conditions. So I think we could liken, the way we grow as spiritual beings to the growth of a plant, the way a plant grows. So the effort we make to nurture our own spiritual growth is very like the sort of effort that a gardener needs to make to nurture a plant. The gardener cannot make the plant bigger than it is directly. Pulling it, trying to stretch it, it's not going to help. Can't make it blossom. Can't make it fruit. What the gardener does and can do is to provide the conditions that help the plant to grow. Give it water, give it sunshine, give it warmth, give it nice, rich soil, protect it from pests, and it will grow. And I think this analogy illustrates something important about the difference between what we might call right and wrong effort in the spiritual life, because it is possible to make a sort of effort in the spiritual life which actually is counterproductive, which doesn't help at all. And I think wrong effort is often about, as it were, pulling the plant to try and stretch it rather than providing the right conditions to make it grow, or something like that. It's about trying to be something we are not, trying to make that happen directly. For example, often in meditation, I think a lot of people do this, and I've done it myself. We try to have a good meditation. We make that where our effort goes, or we try to have maybe the same wonderful meditation that we had a week ago that was so blissful. Or we try to have the sort of meditation that we've read about in a book. But we can't do that. We can't do that. We cannot will ourselves to have a good meditation. We can't will ourselves into dhyana. All we can do is provide the conditions that allow this to happen, and then let it happen. Let go of trying to be in control, even let go of effort. So, we're doing the mindfulness of breathing, we focus on the breath. When we get distracted, we let go of our thoughts and we come back and put our attention on the breath. That is our effort. We just do the practice. We don't try to make something happen. And if we just do the practice, then something might happen. Something might happen if we let it. So thousands of years of experience shows that practice, the mindfulness of breathing, provides the conditions that allow meditative states to arise naturally. If we just do the practice, just let the meditative states arise. If we grit our teeth, try to make our minds blank, try to focus too tightly on the breath, try to make ourselves have the same wonderful meditation we had before, try to make ourselves have the type of meditation that we imagine people have or that we read about in a book, then it won't happen. It won't happen. Meditative states will not arise. Meditative states come from somewhere beyond our will, beyond our present personality, beyond our experience. If we do that, if we make that sort of right effort, it might even make meditation an unpleasant experience for us, and we'll lose our motivation for it. So similarly, outside meditation, we can't suddenly make ourselves different from what we are. So we do the practices that gradually help us to grow beyond what we are now. We put ourselves in the conditions that help us to grow. Doesn't mean we sort of accept that we'll always be that way, but we can't pretend to be somewhere else and start from somewhere that we're not, as it were. So if we're, I don't know, not particularly warm-hearted and empathic, a bit critical and irritable because of the way we've been brought up or whatever, impatient, well, there's not much point in pretending we're the ideal Buddhist, the Bodhisattva, and just sort of suppressing, refusing to admit to ourselves and others the way we actually are. What we do is we do the metta bhavana. We practice acts of kindness. We practice acts of generosity. We cultivate friendships, time around the Sangha, and gradually that effort to do that, then none of that will come naturally to us if we're that sort of person. And I speak from experience. If we do that, gradually our hearts will warm up and we will connect more to others. So we don't pretend to ourselves and others that we're already a bodhisattva. We don't refuse to be aware of where we really are, because if we do that, we won't practice the way we need to practice. We'll probably pretend that we're farther on than we are, and we're making a full frontal effort on insight or something. And to do that, we might as well pretend we're a bird and flap our wings and try and fly, because that's how far we'll get. Okay, so that's a bit about effort and the difference between right effort and the wrong sort of effort. I said at the start of this talk that the amount of right effort we make is directly connected to how motivated we are. More motivation, more effort, more progress. Less motivation, less effort, less progress. No motivation, no effort, no progress. So effort and progress follow naturally if we nurture our motivation. So it makes sense to focus on motivation. And this is what the renowned 8th century teacher Shantideva did in his great work, the Bodhicharya Avatara, the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. In his chapter on virya, which means effort, energy in pursuit of the good, effort in other words, he focuses, when he talks about how to develop virya, how to develop effort, he focuses a lot on motivation, and particularly on skillful desire, desire for the Dharma, desire for progress. He says that if we have that desire, we will make effort quite naturally. We will make progress quite naturally. And he uses the analogy of a piece of cotton being blown along in the breeze. So he says, if we cultivate desire, that desire for progress, that desire for the Dharma, that motivation, we will be effortlessly carried along like a piece of light cotton in the breeze. Or, of course, not really effortlessly. We will be making an effort, but it won't seem like an effort because that's what we want to do. So he spends a lot of his chapter on virya, on effort, telling us about ways to generate motivation and what is called dharma chanda, desire for the dharma, fascination with the dharma. Skillful desire, desire for what's skillful. Actually, he tells us 4 ways to develop virya. And I think they're all related. They all come back to skillful desire. So the 4 ways are skillful desire, desire for the dharma, desire for what's skillful. Self-esteem, or we could say skillful pride. Joy and rest, or letting go. So he starts out by talking specifically about skillful desire. And his recipe for doing this is to reflect deeply, even to meditate on just how good it would be to be more enlightened and how bad it would be to go the other way, to fall down to lower states of being. And probably we're always moving in one direction or the other. We don't stay the same. So he says, suffering, depression, fear, and obstacles beset those who act with unskillfully. But the heart of a person who does good brims over with joy, and they are welcomed wherever they go. But the person who acts unskillfully also craves appreciation, but wherever they go, their vices destroy their unhappiness. So he uses 2 things that motivate all of us. We all want these things. We all want to be happy and to avoid suffering. And I think we all want to be appreciated. And he says if we make the effort to progress, we will be happy and we will be appreciated. If we don't make the effort, or if we don't make the effort to act skillfully, we will suffer. We will suffer and we will not be appreciated. And these are 2 things that, motivate our lives. So if we really get our head around that, well, we will be making that effort. That's what a lot of our lives are about, making those efforts for happiness, to avoid suffering, and to be appreciated. So that's one side of his, one side of that is to reflect deeply on how good it would be to be more enlightened, or even to be completely enlightened. We don't really know what it would be like to be completely enlightened, so it's a bit difficult for us to really imagine it. But maybe we can get a taste of it. Maybe we can get a taste or a glimpse of it, an intuitive sense maybe, by meditating on a Buddha or Bodhisattva figure, contemplating that figure in meditation in our imagination. Maybe that gives us at least a hint of it. Or maybe other things give us some sense of it. The experience of wonderful buildings like cathedrals or something, the music, beauty of nature, the expansiveness of the sky. I don't know. Whatever it is, just a hint. It gives us a hint. And whatever it is, I think value it and just sort of get into it, really. Get into it. Allow it to motivate us. And then I think because we can't really imagine enlightenment, we haven't experienced it in its fullness, the tradition often uses metaphors that we can relate to give us a sense of how good it would be, so that we can reflect on it and want it. And one of those metaphors is the pure land that the Buddha creates, this wonderful pure land, shining with light, where everything brings delight, where the touch of the water and the feel of the air bring delight, and the air is full of wonderful sounds and music and scents, and where we're in a state of community with all these bright, wonderful other beings. So that's something maybe we can get somewhere to sort of imagining that. It's sort of like our ideal world. So Shantideva tells us, the skillful man will dwell in the heart of an expansive, fragrant, cool lotus, their vitality and splendor nourished by the sweet voice of the Buddha. Their beautiful body, born with the other bodhisattvas in the presence of the Buddha, will unfold amid the light of the sage. That's his image of a pure land. So we might bring this into our meditation. Enlightenment would be like living in a pure land. To be enlightened would be like living in a pure land. It would be like living in heaven. So what would heaven be like for you? A beautiful city, a parkland, beautiful countryside, beauty, peace, love, community. What would it involve? And imagining that wonderful, ideal world can maybe give us a glimpse of something beyond our normal experience, beyond our normal world, that we could relate to. And we could relate to this imaginatively, if you like, as being our sort of homeland, where we really belong, and allow ourselves to long for our homeland like an exile longing for their homeland, and allow that longing to motivate us. And if it does, then we will be inspired, we'll be motivated to move towards that state. And as well as suggesting that we motivate on how good it would be to be more enlightened, Shantideva, of course, tells us to meditate on how bad it would be to go the opposite direction, which is not likely to be as pleasant or as popular, but could be very, very effective, actually. So coming from the Tibetan tradition, he talks about the sufferings of the lower realms, and particularly the sufferings of the hell realms. Well, we don't have to believe literally in hell realms to be even a bit scared of falling down to lower states of being. There are mental states, there are states of being that are like being in hell. And we may have even had glimpses of them, hopefully not for long, but we may have had glimpses of them. And it might be good to remember that, so that we really don't want it. We really, really don't want it. And we really, really want to practice to avoid it. So that's Shantideva's first advice, to meditate on how good it would be to make progress and how bad it would be to fall down. And the second thing he talks about is, to promote motivation, is self-esteem or skillful desire, skillful pride. So he contrasts arrogant, unskillful pride with healthy self-esteem. And he suggests we should be too big to be small, if you like. We should be too much healthy pride to act in a mean, small way, to demeaning way, ignoble way. We all want to be someone worthwhile. We all want self-esteem, and we all want respect from others. Others that are whose respect is worth having. And to be someone worthy of that sort of respect, someone who really has self-esteem, well, that comes from spiritual qualities like compassion, generosity, wisdom, strength, integrity. It doesn't come from having a big car with a silly number plate, or the right clothes or the gadgets, or seeming to be wonderful, pretending to be wonderful on Instagram. None of those bring real self-esteem or real respect. The only way that really works is to grow, to become a larger being. So that can be a powerful motivator. To be worthy, to have self-esteem, it can propel us to make the effort to grow. The same sort of effort that people put into having that sense of self-esteem and respect from money and career and possessions and style. People's whole lives can be devoted, their whole careers, their working lives can be devoted to getting that sort of self-esteem and that sort of respect from others. So it's a powerful motivator. It's a powerful motivator. And if we seek that sort of self-esteem and respect from others in the right way, there's nothing wrong with it, if we do it in the right way. So one of the things we've sometimes done on retreats is to lead people in an exercise where we call it the Future Wiser Self exercise. And we suggest people imagine what they could be like further down the path. A bigger, wiser, stronger version of themselves. So imagine, what would your body language look like? How would you dress? What would your facial expressions look like? What would your eyes look like? Yeah, just want that. So you could try that yourselves in meditation. Imagine what you could be like. How would you hold yourself? What would the expression on your face be? What would your eyes look like? What would you look like? What would it feel like to be like that? And you could connect with how good it would be. to be that future wiser self, so that you want to be that person and allow that to motivate you to do the things that will lead you to becoming that person. You could try it. So I think I'm running out of time here. So I'm not really going to talk about the last two, which are joy and rest, except to say that we need joy, we need pleasure in our spiritual life. If we don't have that, there won't be much motivation. If we just turn it into a dry, dogged grind, there won't be much motivation. So we need to find joy in our practice. And we probably need to also keep some of our sources of pleasure from outside our practice, even if they don't seem very dharmic. It might be football, it might be climbing, it might be playing music. I don't know what it is. As long as it's not unskillful, it's a real mistake to cut off all our sources of pleasure just because they're distractions from the Dharma life. If we do that, we probably end up pretty dry and pretty unmotivated. I'm cutting out some of my talks. I think I need to end, but I just finish off by saying that if we make the effort of the right kind of effort, if we focus on wanting it and on our motivation, then we can make the right kind of effort in a way that will seem effortless. We can be blown along like Shantideva's piece of cotton by the breeze. If we nurture our desire to make progress and our motivation, we will be blown along towards enlightenment like a piece of cotton on the breeze. Thank you.